Welcome to the Business Owners Counsel, Legal Issues from Growth to Exit.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Business Owners Counsel, Legal Issues from Growth to Exit. I'm Sean O'Connor, and in each episode, we sit down with Kevin Brick, founder of Brick Business Law and trusted advisor to Florida companies, to talk through the strategies business owners need to grow, protect, and maximize the value of their businesses. I'm really excited because today we're talking about how companies can get the most value from their lawyer and that relationship. Kevin, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you.
We talked about related issues of value in previous conversations. I'm curious, once a business hires a lawyer, what determines whether that relationship actually works well? Like, what are the metrics?
Well, the dynamic really is that you should see that there's collaboration between the business owners and the law firm and attorneys, and there's transparency between them. Shouldn't try to be hiding facts from each other. Oftentimes that does happen, but sharing the information as transparently as possible is a big factor. Um, that's the only way the lawyers can give good advice, is if they understand the full picture. And so businesses that actually integrate their attorneys into the strategic planning aspects of their businesses actually get much better outcomes than those who are not collaborating as often, only reactive. So those are some of the key touch points you could say, hey, this is a good relationship and it's working well, or it needs improvement.
What companies miss? I mean, you kind of touched on this, but if I'm only calling my lawyer during a crisis, like, what am I missing out on?
Yeah, I mean that's the typical situation, unfortunately. Once you're in crisis mode, typically that means you've lost leverage. Things may have gone a certain way already, and so you're already playing defense or reacting to things. Things might have escalated in terms of a dispute. There's deals that are already signed without the attorney being part of that negotiation process. Um, Usually, what will happen is you'll see higher costs, right? The fixing things is a lot more expensive, or trying to fix things after the fact is a lot more expensive than prescriptively. Um, for the business owner and for the law firm, that situation causes uncertainty. It causes risks. Crisis situations are not where oftentimes people are responding the best way. I would say the legal input, um, when you compare it to early discussions where it's preventative versus later ones, very different dynamic of discussion of choices that can be made. So really the advice of that is have regular conversations beforehand that can help you reduce the likelihood of litigation that can be expensive and stressful, or even just uncertain outcomes overall afterwards, after the fact. So I would say try to have those discussions before the crisis, right? Maybe it'll help you avoid it. Maybe it will help you minimize it.
Yeah, it makes sense. I hear that, like, a narrowing of options. Like, oh, if you'd contacted me earlier, we could have done X, Y, and Z, but now we're limited. I'm curious, what does it look like? What do lawyers need from their clients in order to do their best work? I mean, obviously, you mentioned, a good communication, a two-way communication is essential. What other factors, from your point of view, do you need to really do your best work?
Well, one we just talked about, early involvement when problems come up, even before they come up, if possible, to allow for better options to discuss. Transparency and honesty about what has happened, what even the bad facts, if they got to be considered and discussed at a time or as early as possible. One is just allowing your lawyers to have access to the people who are the decision makers in the business. A lot of times, um, you're not talking to the board, or you're not talking to the key executive. Sometimes you're talking to a middle level person that really they can't make the strategic level decision. It's got to be a leadership buy-in. Um, Providing information that's organized and correct is very helpful in reducing costs and making things flow better. And then one that we've talked about in other segments is just being aligned on goals, making sure that attorneys understand what the outcome is that the client is seeking. Do they want a quick resolution? Do they want to be very aggressive? Is cost a big driving factor? Is time? So that having that clarity um, from your client is very helpful in terms of getting a successful outcome.
Got it. You had you just touched on expense, I think, a little earlier, and I know we've talked in previous episodes about the mistake a firm can make or a business can make by basing their hiring of an attorney solely on cost. And obviously, everybody's got cost concerns in a business. How do the businesses go about controlling legal costs without compromising the quality representation?
It's a constant question, and it's not always a struggle. So one thing to do is to make sure you set expectations early in the process. So that would mean defining the scope of the things that you want the attorney to work on or not work on, and that should be a two-way street. So a lot of times, a client may tell you something like, "Hey, just tell me what this agreement should say, and I'll write it." So that's not good. That's not a good approach. But you should talk about the scope of who should be doing what, and that includes how the law firm's staffing the matter. What's an appropriate level of attorney or staff person to be doing different tasks on a assignment, and making sure essentially that the the tasks are done at a level where it's as cost effective as possible. And then another one, of course, is having good communication. You don't want to have communication between the client and the law firm and internally within the law firm about who's doing what. Um, I alluded to having the right level of lawyer. So some law firms they don't have levels. So you got to make sure if you're talking to a firm that's handling a complex body of work, that you want to have different levels of people working on it so that you're billed appropriately. Law firms now, they can leverage a lot of technology platforms to have much more efficient processes than even a year ago. And so modern firms are using, appropriate AI tools. They're using appropriate research tools. They're doing so in a very efficient and effective way, and that keeps costs contained. You alluded to a little bit sort of the structured billing idea, making sure that you want to tie incentives together correctly. So businesses and attorneys really, they do understand that the amount of time you put into something is not necessarily indicative of the value of the output. So I think there is a little more of an understanding now of not just time-based billing, but flat fees or kind of caps and scopes and different things like that. So have those discussions to see where you can be creative on the billing. And then another big one is really just focusing on preventative work instead of reactive work. So doing things early and well and ahead of problems can reduce a lot of costs later, either by making sure that the business doesn't have certain risks, or when things do go wrong, that it's protected. Um, getting ahead of problems, all those things. It's hard because you don't necessarily see um, the costs that you don't incur as a result of doing that correct, but they do exist. I can tell you from seeing businesses that haven't done things well, their costs are much higher than those who did do them well.
Yeah, right. There's no right that idea that you get a sort of uh, a credit instead of a bill that reflects the fact that, hey, by informing us of that XYZ yesterday, you've potentially saved yourself $5,000 in future legal fees. Like that eight ball technology doesn't exist. Magic eight ball
Right.
technology. Yeah.
You'd love to be able to send them out bills for the amounts of money they've saved from doing things the right way.
At what stage should a company considering outside general counsel?
Yeah, well, so when companies are growing, as they hire employees, they take on new locations, they might take on more owners or investors. When those things happen, the complexity of the business increases. So there's no particular problem that came up, but you know that you have a larger surface area for problems to exist. So as those businesses are growing, they should be thinking about having counsel in place as a regular relationship and to become part of the strategic leadership team to start getting them involved in decision making. If a company goes through rapid growth or it's getting ready to go to a new phase, like it's getting ready for a sale or it's getting ready for a leadership transition. So those are kind of the general things. And one of the things we see is when a company has starting at $1 million or $2 million of revenue, even up to 20 million. And if they don't have an in-house attorney, then they can benefit from having a regular outside general counsel. And it just lets them have very consistent legal guidance without having that, full-time attorney on their headcount.
We mentioned, or we were talking earlier about things that contribute to, things running smoothly in a strong relationship and what the elements of that are. I'm thinking about, you know, if you had to picture what an ideal long-term relationship between a business and its law firm look like, what would that be? I'm also wondering about, you're working with businesses that hopefully are growing. Do you hire more horsepower than you need at the front end at the anticipation of growing?
That can be a good strategy. Getting things squared away, so to speak, on the front end of anticipated changes is a really good way to look at it. And that's something that we see from successful relationships with businesses is that the lawyer is on the front end of those decisions. That results in having regular communications, understanding the strategic vision, understanding the next steps. That avoids the emergency call to your attorney about something is going wrong, or we have this last minute thing we're trying to unwind. Um, in that situation, those companies have not used their attorney as a strategic value advisor. It's like trying to use them as emergency call for the problem that they created. We see companies that when we have a regular relationship with them, they actually get faster problems resolution by having that regular communication. There's a there's a relationship that's built on trust where it's just you're emailing back and forth when you need to, you're picking up the phone. There's a regular standing call or meeting with the leadership team. There's tasks that we understand that need to be done in a certain amount of time. And so having that proactive relationship, that's really what we see as the ones who are understanding each other well, performing, as I've said, sort of hand in glove and executing well on the strategic legal goals of a company.
Yeah, again, I'm thinking context. If you call me with a problem and I'm already pretty well aware of what you've been up to as a business, I I know how we got here. Like, oh, this scenario did come up, and we probably even talked about it. You know, so that's obviously you get to a quicker resolution that way.
Yes.
Related really to the previous question, let's say I'm a business owner and I hire what is at the time an appropriately sized firm with the right skill sets that I need. Do you, I'm assuming this happens, let's say you outgrow the firm. Is that sort of, again, assuming an ideal relationship where we're talking to each other on the regular? And does the conversation happen where it's like, hey, I think we've reached the point where you need to go find a bigger, different, more specialized. So like, does that happen with businesses and their firms?
It does. There's a couple ways it could look. So one is that the original attorney is a good match in terms of their practice area, but maybe they don't have all the specialists that they need to assist. And sometimes that lawyer can stay involved and they can sort of quarterback the legal work. They might bring in an IP attorney or a tax attorney when they recognize there's issues. And that can be a very useful resource still for the attorney that's kind of been there from the beginning. They understand everything. and they've got a good relationship. And sometimes it can be a transition where you say, look, legal has become a choke point for the company. And so we just need a bigger firm, or somebody, a firm that understands us better. And it's good to just recognize when that relationship dynamic has outgrown its usefulness. And it's good to also recognize what kind of a transition needs to be made, whether that person should stay on because of their um, their value to understanding the historical issues with the company, or if a handoff needs to happen. And that is a regular thing that occurs. And you know, even though that can be difficult for one party or the other, ultimately the transition is best really for both sides, for the attorney and for the business. And so that conversation should be had regularly too. Are we meeting your needs? Are we able to serve the things that you need to do? And that's part of kind of the honest communications that we've talked about.
Yeah, that idea that, again, you've got an ideal relationship with your attorney, regardless of size. And now you've got all this institutional knowledge, this asset, and you don't want to just squander it. That idea of quarterbacking or that transition, or, staying involved for a period of time seems super smart, because assuming you've already invested, you've invested a lot in the relationship.
Yeah.
But great talking to you as usual. I look forward to future conversations.
All right. Me too. Thanks for having me.
That's it for today's episode of the Business Owners Counsel, Legal Issues from Growth to Exit. If you're a Florida business leader evaluating legal counsel or thinking more strategically about your company's legal relationships, you can learn more about Kevin Brick and the team at brickbusinesslaw.com. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a fellow business leader. I'm Sean O'Connor. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.